Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Fiddle. Today I'll be showing you how I made this working drafting table. Please note that this won't be a proper tutorial. I need to rework the pattern and I ran out of time, so I haven't gotten a chance to do that yet. I do plan to have a scavenger hunt for it just like I would any other tutorial. I used some pretty interesting pieces to make it, and I encourage you to go out and try finding your own. And it may lead to memories that last a lifetime, but we'll get to that later. Doing a Google search, I found a few different drafting desks that I really liked, and in the end came up with kind of an idea on my own. While I was coming up with the drawing, I was going through my stashes to see what I had to make this desk work. Next, it was making a rough pattern and cutting the pieces out. Before I start gluing the pieces together, I've got to mark out where my drawer lines are going to be. This will help me later on. However, one of them I ended up putting upside down, but the other two I got in the right way, so I at least had those to go by. While I've also got it apart, I need to plan out where the drill hole needs to be for the cog that I'm going to be putting on it. So I grabbed my bin that's got the pieces in it that I'm going to be using for the next few projects. I've been saving these pieces for a while, not knowing what I would be using them for, and I thought this would be a perfect opportunity. Have you ever taken apart a printer to find out what's inside? If you haven't and you ever get the chance to, I would. There's some pretty interesting things in there, like gears, lights, pulleys, motors, all kinds of little things. Now that I've got the hole marked out, I'm gonna drill it with my hand drill. And then I can start gluing it together. While all of that is drying, I grabbed my bin that has all of the bits in it and grabbed the pieces that I wanted to use for the chair. And that was a piece of clear plastic from candy packaging. My husband came up with the idea of using an ear thermometer protective cover thing, a bottle cap, and a piece from a drone. The idea is to use a toothpick as the post and poke it through the point of the cone, through the hole in the drone part thing, and then top it off with a bottle cap seat. I had to make a few adjustments, but that's okay. It turned out just like I wanted it to. One of the adjustments I had to make was cutting into the bottle cap where the drone part sticks out from underneath, so that way there isn't a gap there. Using a white marker, I marked out where both of the posts were. Then I used a pair of pliers and nippers, I guess, wire cutters, to cut that area out. On a side note, I did realize that I put this piece together so many times and took it apart and put it back together over and over again just to make sure that each time I changed something or did something, it still worked. The next problem that I had is that the hole in this drone piece is too big to hold the toothpick in place. Now I did change to a skewer which was a lot thicker than the dowel but still too small to hold in place. So I found a wood bead that fit securely in that hole and E6000 it in place. Next I needed to trim down the cone plastic piece so it fit just inside of the bottle cap. For that, I used a white marker to mark out my lines and trim the excess away. If you use a ear thermometer protector, I don't think you should have to trim it at all, and it would probably fit a little bit better. To give a better chance for the glue and paint to stick to this plastic piece, I went ahead and sanded both the inside and the outside as good as I could. Then I put it together one last time with E6000. The next problem I had was trying to figure out how to attach the stool or chair to the table itself. I originally planned to use some thick black wire that I had used in previous projects, but it was really hard to bend into delicate shapes like I originally wanted, so I had to find another solution. I had set a plastic pair of tweezers aside just in case I couldn't use the wire, so thankfully I had something. I measured how much of the wedge part I would need and marked it with my white marker. Then I trimmed it down to just what I needed. I did have to do a bit of sanding on the connecting end though to make it rounded so the chair would swing in and out. Next, I used my favorite measuring tool and measured my chair to make sure my doll fits at the right height, and then I cut it to size. Next, I needed to drill the holes so I would have spots for the dowels to go through. One hole through the handle or connected piece, then through both of the other ends so that way we can put our chair through there. I used a few different bits to get it big enough for the chair post to fit through. And of course, I had to put it all back together to make sure that everything fit okay. Now that the chair is completely done, I have to fix the desk so I can attach it to it. To fix it, I cut a rectangle dowel the length of the inside drawer wall, drilled a hole through it, and glued myself and it along the bottom inside edge of the desk. Both hands, not just one of them. Now that it's in place, I set it aside to dry and turn my attention to the gear that's going to make the desktop go up and down. Just like I did for the drone piece, I had to add a bead to the center of the gear so it took up space and would hold against the toothpick. I'm not sure what this piece is actually called, but I called it gear teeth rail on the scavenger hunt. This is the piece that the gear is going to move up and down. To hold the piece steady against the desk, I cut a slit along the center of it. To start the slit cut, I first drilled a hole at both ends and then used a knife to go back and forth until I got through all the layers. I'm still really not sure what this thing was made out of, but it did come out of a printer. Before I go any further, my desk should be dry enough that I can start working with it again. I need to drill the hole in the top portion of the desk to house the dowel for the chair. Now I can do a dry run test fit to make sure everything's working and where it should be. And while I've got it together, I'm going to mark the dowel so I can cut it to sit flush with the top of the desk. Now I'm ready for paint. I give both the chair, the little gear, and the tweezers a coat of black metallic paint. If you have a plastic fast paint, that would even be better. Once they were completely dry, I gave them a coat of clear nail polish to hopefully stop some cracking and chipping. While that was drying, I went ahead and turned my attention back to the gear. Instead of using wire like I had originally planned, I decided that I was going to use a fancy-ended toothpick as the peg post. I went back and forth with myself a few times on which direction to glue this gear on. On one side, it has a completely flat edge where the gear teeth aren't showing, and then on the other side, they're showing. Now, for functionality's sake, I should have turned the gear around the other way, so the flat edge was facing out and the gear teeth were closer towards the desk. But there were a few problems with that. One was the back side or the flat side didn't look the greatest because I have that wood bead down in there and you can really see it on the flat side. Whereas the side with the teeth, you can see it, but it's painted black and it looks a lot neater. In the end, on the flat side, I ended up pouring a little bit of resin down in there just to make sure that those pieces wouldn't come apart because with just the glue, I didn't think it would hold. The other problem was with the teeth up against the desk, it really hindered this turning of the knob, which is pretty important to make the desk go up and down. I even tried cutting a small circle of plastic to put it in between the desk and the gear to try to help it turn, but it just looked funny. In the end, I went with the gear teeth facing out. And as a handle or knob, I used a smaller wooden bead on the end of the fancy end of the toothpick. Now I need to set it in place so I can measure how long the post needs to be and a little bit extra just to make sure. I added the bead on the inside as close as I could to the wall without stopping it from turning. Now that I have the gear attached, I can go ahead and add the first tabletop. There are two tabletops to a drafting desk, one to cover the bottom portion or the cabinets, and then the other to raise up and down for the drawing or writing surface. To attach these two tabletops together, I'm using chipboard or cereal box cardboard. I think that maybe a little leather strap would be better, but I don't have any at the moment. I cut two rectangles about an inch wide and 2 inches long, one for each side of the desk. Then using a ball stylus and a ruler, I gave nice creases towards the center. This will help it fold better over the edge of the table. Next, I glue the strips to the underneath side of the table. For this strap, I didn't go all the way to the edge of the desk because I know I still need to add the fourth leg on, so I wanted to leave some room for that. While that's drying, I went ahead and moved on to working with the tabletop. First, I need to make a hole on the side that's going to be next to the gear. This is where my gear teeth strip is going to be attached. I went as deep as my little pointy tool would let me, and that was about half an inch. Then I took a bit of wire that was about an inch long and put an eye hook at one end. Then I poked the wire through the teeth rail and finally into the side of the desk where I poked the hole earlier. One more dry run test fit before I glue it together. And it works! Now I can glue the top table portion down by putting glue on the cardboard straps that I glued down earlier. Once the top was dry, I could start adding in the shelves. Altogether, I put 4 in, but I have 5 drawers. I did consider making them out of chipboard or cereal box cardboard, but for something like this, I thought the wood would definitely be better. Since the shelves were drying, I figured I might as well finish the mechanism up. First, I drilled a hole through the side of a small oval wood bead. Making sure not to go all the way through, I only needed this hole on one half of the bead. Then I put a crook in the end of a stiff wire, poked it through the hole that I drilled, and E6000 it in place. Once it's dry, I'll be adding it along the back of the desk. But for now, we're going to finish making the drawers. 4 of the drawers are smaller, and then the top drawer is a bit larger. I did this because a lot of the photos showed a larger drawer up top. Not to mention, I think it kind of makes up for the lack of depth, since we can't make it all the way back to the back of the cabinet. I did use chipboard for the drawers themselves because it is thinner and seems a little more accurate than if I would have used wood. And since I was already working on the drawers, I figured I might as well put the faces on. I did use real wood for this just to give it a clean finish. While they were drying, I went ahead and finished off the fourth leg. I didn't have plans for this part of the desk, so it was kind of a figure it out as I went. I'm really not sure what to call this first piece, but it goes along the bottom and gives support to the 2 posts that I need to attach vertically. Once I had those 2 posts cut, I had to drill a hole corresponding to the hole on the other side of the drawer wall. This is where our footrest goes across. Now I can add the toothpick and glue this part in place. Now that that's done, I can add the second leg. I could have left it with just one leg on this side, but I really liked how some of the examples that I had seen had 2. The drawers fit pretty good, but I need to do a bit of sanding on them so they all line up properly. Next, I attached the wood bead and metal post that I made earlier. To make brackets, I cut a small oval wood bead in half. To put it in place, I put it through the slit I made earlier through the rail teeth, then glued the 2 half beads over top of the wire. I put the chair back on off screen, and now it's time to add the final piece, and that is the pencil stopper rail along the front edge. And it's off to painting. I gave it a soft brown color mixed with water. Once the paint was dry, I gave it a bit of a sanding in areas that I thought would be worn the most, like on the sides of the drawers and the edges of the table, and of course the footrest. To get started off on the right foot with this piece, I decided to make a tiny drafting pencil. For this, I cut just the end of a fancy-ended toothpick off and sanded it down like a pencil tip would be. Then I dipped just the very tip into my black metallic paint, and there we have a little pencil. If you wanted to get fancy and add metal flashing, you could use a little strip of aluminum foil and paint the other end red. And with that, it brings us to the end of our video. I hope this gives you some ideas for your next project and that you run across an old printer. It is something that my son and I enjoy doing together. Our next two pieces will be a telescope and a globe made out of odds and ends. The scavenger hunt for these two pieces are included with the scavenger hunt for this piece. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for being here. If you're not already, please consider being a subscriber. I am so close to the 500 mark and I am so excited about it. But the hours is a long way to go. So if you haven't seen any of my other tutorials, I encourage you to go watch them. Thank you, Ginger, and I'll see you next time.